We say good evening and praise the Lord to everyone that has joined us through Facebook Live and YouTube. We're thankful for those who have joined us in person and taking the time out to come as we begin another rehab session where we are restoring, equipping, healing, and building. We thank you for joining us for our biblical encounter. We thank those who joined us through Facebook and YouTube Live. We want to definitely ask everyone, we please ask tonight, take a few moments, if you have not already done it, please pray for the families and the community that has been impacted from the tragedy that happened on yesterday in Texas. Please pray for the families and the community. We know there's a lot going on in the land and the devil is raising his head, but please pray. Someone, mom didn't come home, someone, child did not come home yesterday because of the violence that happened on yesterday. And please continue to remember to pray for those suffering from the tragedy last weekend or the weekend before. Please forgive me if I'm mixing up my weekend. And those in the shooting in Buffalo, please pray for them. Please lift them up in prayer tonight before you go to bed or you drive home. Just remember them and say a prayer for the family. As we jump in, those know that we are still in our series, Talk Communication is Key 4, and this week is going to be a very brief lesson, and we'll go into more of the lesson on next week. Last week we dealt with some of the main elements of communication, but last week, thank you so much, thank y'all so much. Please forgive me. We have to do this. This is customary in our house, our declaration. This is what we say to change the climate and environment. Thank y'all so much. Please repeat after me on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
We declare to speak life and not death. We will build and not condemn. The atmosphere will be charged with and not fear. We are the head and not the tail. We are above only and not beneath. In all things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. This domain is restoration and dominion.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for reminding me. Please forgive me. That is charged back to my head and not my heart. As we jump in to our lesson, as we do, we're going to do a brief review and jump into new information this week. This is week 4. Please remember our base scripture for this series is Ephesians 4:29. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers. Please remember, the worst distance between two people is misunderstanding. That's what we're trying to do, is eliminate, trying to cut back on misunderstanding by communicating better, by communicating more. Understand this. This is very important. When someone is speaking, practice getting out of your head and into their hearts. We have to make sure that we go beyond hearing them, that we're actually listening. And that's what we dealt with last week, being an active listener. And I can tell you, since last week to this week, I failed a few of those active listening tests where somebody said something and I didn't hear you, or I wasn't listening. I heard, but I wasn't listening. So that's why we're going to review them, because practice makes perfect, and the Bible says moreover. So please, let's remember this as part of this lesson. Please remember, you cannot communicate. We're saying stick this in keep this, you cannot, we are always communicating. Please remember that we're always communicating. Also remember from this series, you can't take back what you communicated. Once you put it out there, it's out there. So you have to make sure you communicate wisely. You communicate being mindful of the person that you're communicating. Let's review the active listening, not only for me, but mainly for me and others, so we can make sure. Understand, we talked about this last week. When you are an active listener, you are paying to the messenger and the message. One goal of an active listener is being and listening, is active listening and being an effective listener is to set a comfortable tone. Comfortable tone. I can promise you, those who are listening to me through Facebook Live and YouTube, those are in person, if I yell the whole lesson, most of the time, not most of the time, many would tune me out. That's not a tone you want to hear for 35, 40 minutes. And I can promise you, most of us don't like people yelling at us. So we have that the tone is comfortable. Also last week, we talked about when being an active listener, you have to learn how to withhold judgment. You can't be an active listener and the whole time you're judging every word that drop out of their mouth. When they say a word, they lie. When they say something, they ain't gonna do that. They doing it again. You have to make sure you withhold judgment. Active listening requires an open mind. The person needs to understand and needs to see that, hey, they're not already throwing me to the wolves. They're not already casting me aside. Let me finish sharing the message or what's in my heart. You want to make sure as an active listener, that you're not judging the messenger. You're not judging the message. Let them talk. Let them finish. Consider the end of the conversation. And remember, we told you that the Bible said, judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Understand that you want to hear the whole matter. Talk it over. Don't pass judgment. Don't automatically come to a conclusion about the end of the conversation or what the person is sharing and you have not heard everything. What we talked about last week, for listening, we have to reflect. You have to reflect. We have to make sure. You have to make sure that you reflect back on what he said. You have to make sure that they understand what's going on. When you're the listener, don't assume that you understand the messenger and the message correctly, but that you know you have heard. You want to know, that you've heard them. That's why you reflect. That's why you go back and say, let me make sure of this. Make sure you have to reflect. Also, very important, something that we all do. When you're an active listener, you verify. You want it crystal clear. You want it so clear. Have you ever seen somebody walk into a glass door because it's been that clean, that clear? That's how clear I need this message to be. The reason why I needed that clear, so there's no isms, schisms, and I said, well, I thought you said, let's clarify. Let's clarify. Don't be shy when you clarify to ask a question about any issue that's open for question or debate. Make sure you have to clarify. So to clarify, you're going to have to reflect. You're going to have to bring it back up. So you want to make sure you have to be clear. Listen to this. When the Lord speaks to us through his word, when he speaks to us in worship, when he speaks to us, he is very clear. It's us that say, are you sure, Lord? That's what you want me to do? You sure that the Lord is very clear? There's not confusion when the Lord speaks, and we're going to deal with that later on. Also, in active listening, we're reviewing. You want to make sure you summarize. When you get done talking, you summarize, you get it clear. This is talked about, so make sure. You want to make sure when y'all behave yourself, you want to make sure class is acting up. You want to make sure you summarize. Okay? Listen, when you summarize and active listening, you're restating key themes. Okay? Key theme. Somebody, I can put you in the corner. We're going to make sure they are showing off doing rehab. They are so funny. You want to make sure that you summarize. You restate key themes and the conversation proceeds and you confirm things. I'm one of those people, I will triple, double confirm. Because if you tell me to show up at 8 and I show up at 8, but you meant 10, guess what happened when you get there at 10? This joker will be gone by 8:15. So we want to make sure we're clear. There's nothing wrong with going back and confirming, getting your confirmation. There's times I wish we could. This sounds crazy. I wish at times that we could have confirmation numbers between us like businesses do. Let me send you this confirmation that you're going to pay for my dinner. To make sure, confirmation 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you paying them. There's just things we just want to make sure we have to confirm. Last, on active listening, we have to learn how to share. Active listening is first about understanding the other person, then about being understood as a listener. Do you not know many times when we talk, when we communicate, one of the goals that many people don't understand, that many times you just want to be understood. You just want to be heard. And see, this is what happens with communication, and most people forget. When you share something, you're trying to make sure that the person understands, feels, and almost take in what you are feeling or your experience. I love people that tell a good story that have you thinking and feeling like I was there. So you have to understand it. So that's the review. So let's jump right into the lesson this week. We will be brief. We're going to touch on communicating through the noise. Communicating through the noise. Noise is a sound, especially one that is loud or unpleasant, or that causes a disturbance. Noise. You have to communicate through the noise. Have you ever been trying to get rest and somebody does not have the decency to be considerate and they make noise, or they disturb you while you're trying to get rest? How irritating is it? You're trying to sleep, they make a noise. You trying to read or you trying to pray, it's a distraction. We have to learn that even though there's noise, there's distractions, we still need to communicate. And we have to learn how to communicate through the noise, because guess what? Every time we need to talk, every time we need to address something, it's not always going to be quiet. And we're not always talking physically. We're talking about emotion. We're talking about spiritual. We're talking about financially. Every time you need to talk to somebody, it's not always going to be the perfect atmosphere. So we have to learn how to communicate through the noise. Now listen, just as loud noises can drown out a speaker's voice, intellectual noise can keep people from hearing you. Listen to this. They will not benefit, the person that's listening will not benefit from a sermon, a preacher, a speaker, content if it's over their heads or it insults their intelligence. When someone is preaching, they have to remember, or speaking, they have to remember this is a common salvation. You do not want somebody to talk to you, and every other word, they are attacking your intelligence. They're attacking your integrity. They're attacking your, they're just judging you. So you have to understand is that when you speak to somebody, you have to learn how to communicate through the noise or communicate through the distractions. Because one thing that will irk your nerves as an individual when you're talking, someone is allowing, the listener is allowing things to distract them while you're trying to share with them. You would get very irritated. Have you ever been on the phone? You try to talk to somebody and somebody having another conversation with this one while trying to talk to you? And how long will it take for you to say, man, just call me back later? I get very irritated. You're barely talking to me. You're answering that person, turn here. No, I thought we was going here. Have you ever talked to somebody? You on the phone talking to them and they had a drive-through? Oh my God, that's irritating. Oh my goodness. It's very irritating because you're trying to have a conversation like, yeah, you want cheese? And I don't want no cheese. Yeah, that's what I meant, Ronnie. Well, pour it around. How much is my total? It's very frustrating because why? There's noise around. There's a disturbance. We have to learn to eliminate the noise when we communicate. And guess what? What's very important is a preacher, a teacher, a pastor has to learn that too. Because every time someone gets up, we're not just talking about those that carry the title of a pastor, bishop. We're talking about, let's bring it out. Let's say an auxiliary gets together. The head of auxiliary got to learn how to effectively communicate through the noise. Because guess what? When people come in and they're tired, guess what tired means? It's a disturbance. It's a noise. But what happens is we have to learn how to communicate through the noise. Listen to this. For all, not just the preacher, we must learn and we must know our audience. If it's an audience of one or the audience of 1,000, you need to know your audience. Because what happens is you shouldn't. I said you can't, but some people do. You do not want to, if your audience of the listener is shy, the listener is emotional, you have to know how to communicate through the noise of their insecurities. You have to learn, you really want to know how they, because if they've been fighting and battling all day with some sensitive subjects, the last thing you want to do if you need to communicate or you need to say we need to talk, they don't want you at the end of the day bouncing on them. The noise, there's been a lot of noise through the day. You'd be surprised how some people drive home has been chaotic. Not that I drove crazy. Not that I drove crazy, but you gotta understand that this time for some of us are being sane, being calm, and others are driving crazy. Or you get up and have a nice day, but the person in the drive-through is not having a nice day. There's been times where where the cashier at Walmart got me a little upset and frustrated because of their mood, their attitude. We have to learn how to communicate through the noise. So you got to know your audience. And how do you know the audience? By looking at the cues, the verbal, the nonverbal. If somebody's listening or not listening, if somebody's very active and keeping up, that helps you communicate. Understand, if speakers offend, listen to this, if speakers offend the listeners with cultural differences and insensitivities, instead of wrong job giving, you have to understand, when you insult people, when you offend people, when sharing a message, it's easily for them to shut down and stop listening. This is why you need to know the audience. See, this is what's very important to understand, no matter who you are and what title you are, that you have to make sure that you're not insensitive, you're not mean and spiteful, you're not being condescending when you're trying to share some information. Because the last thing somebody really wants when you're communicating is that you're talking to them and that you're belittling them, that you're talking to them like they're ignorant. So you got to be careful when you talk to people. Understand, you have to remember, we have to be very understanding when it comes to people education level, people's cultural differences, people experiences. You also got to remember when you communicate with people, what's very important is what they've been dealing with for the day. Because what happens is you have to understand is how can I say it? You don't know how long somebody has been putting up with somebody not putting their stapler back on their desk. And that one day you joke about the stapler and that's the day they snap. So you gotta understand is that we have to be careful and you have to share things because you don't know what somebody dealt with before they have what they dealt with before the conversation with you. So it's almost like when you get done with a conversation with one person, a situation one, you almost have to clean yourself up, change your mindset, because no one should suffer or get the spillover from a conversation that they had nothing to do. It's like making somebody in a current relationship suffer from what you experienced from the past. Yes. That is so wrong. So we have to understand that. So other barriers that we come into when it comes to communicating is misunderstandings. Listen to this learning style. Do you not know that we all learn differently? Yeah. Some of us are great visual learners. Some of us do great audio. We hear it one time, it sticks in things. Some, they got to hear it 21 times, times 21 times. We all learn differently. And there's certain things that cause us to click. So you got to remember, when communicating, you have different learning styles. This is one. There's definitely different personality styles or types. There's a lot of distractions. We learn differently. When we work with people, we got to understand we have to have clear communication. Communicate through the noise. You have to be clear and specific. Understand this. For preachers and speakers, when they prepare sermons for specific audiences to communicate the biblical message to their audiences, they must be relevant. Okay? You have to be relevant to who you're talking to. That goes to the usher. That goes to the manager on the job. You got to be relevant. You got to bring the message to people's doorsteps and to where they can relate. And I know it's not always easy, but you have to be able to be relatable. This is one thing my father used to always say, which is very important when you communicate. He would say, it's how you relate to people that makes the difference. How are you sharing the message? Because honestly, many times we know the truth about some situations. We just don't want to hear it at the time. I don't need you. I prefer not. No. I would prefer that you share the message in the nicest way possible. Because a lot of times, remember we said in the very beginning, when you hear the phrase, we need to talk, it's either heavy, it's either serious. Most times you don't joke around, we need to talk. Not with that phrase. So we have to understand is how you relate it to people. Now there's some situations, there's some conversations, some people just ain't gonna be prepared for. I'm being honest. Death is one of those things, somebody's not sitting like, okay, I'm gonna bring you on the conversation. It's not a comfortable thing. A separation is not comfortable. Firing some people are uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? Sharing with somebody you made a mistake when they trust you to make it is not comfortable. But how you relate it is very important. Okay? Wow. Okay, for preaching and teaching to be transformative, the message must break through the noise. Listen to this. We have a lot of distractions in our lives. Understand, our distractions can be personal and our distraction can be spiritual. But you have to understand that for it to be transformative, we got to break through the noise. That's why people that stand behind the podium, praise, worship leaders, even ushers, we have to prepare ourselves during the week. Because guess what? When people come to worship, they've had distractions, they have had weights on them all week. And you have to understand, even if you got to stand in front of the mirror and practice your smile, practice how you doing, it's a good day, the Lord loves you, you have to be prepared. Because somebody, you don't know this, but it has happened. A husband and wife will argue all the way to church. Get out of the car, she done slammed the door, he done sped all, and you see it all happening in front of you. But how you relate is very important. Because that smile, that hug could change and bring that spirit down that's been raging up. And what we forget is you're still communicating. And you have to remember that. So what you have to make sure of, that you have to break through the noise and you have to be prepared. How do you prepare yourself to communicate? Listen, praying, practicing. You have to most people say, practice communicating. Yeah, you have to practice. Because guess what? Those hard people, those people that you really don't care to conversate with, you try. But you also have to be prayerful. Because the last thing I need is someone calling Pastor Jones, I need bail money because I tried to have a conversation with somebody and it didn't work. It's a learning process. We need to talk. And you can tell by the body language. You can tell by the nonverbal. You can tell there's some people that act like they don't hear you. They're not listening, but they actually do because that's a defense mechanism to say, I don't want to talk about it right now. So we have to understand that. So let me move on. When communicating, please be aware of the distractions. When you communicate, you must learn and you must practice focusing on the message that you're trying to share and not the messenger. It's not easy if a pastor, a church leader, or somebody you have confidence in, how can I say it, mess over you or do you wrong. Because the Lord can still speak to them, but that's when we have to learn to get past the messenger and hear what the Lord has for you through the message. And we'll touch with that a little later. We have a lot going on in our lives. So you have to understand, we all have distractions. We all have noise. You have to understand, you listen to, how many people y'all know have side hustles? How many people you know that has family, that have to do with education, businesses, and so on? There are some people that for years they have had to be by themselves, and now some situation of change in their family, now they have to take a family member in and take care of. Those that had to take care of parents while they were sick, or children while they're sick. It changes your norm. And we all know when our norm changes, we get a little uncomfortable. So we have to be careful of how we interact, how we communicate. This was very important. The Bible said, lest Satan should take the advantage of us, we should not be ignorant of his devices. You have to understand, I don't want you to do it. I joke around, do it. Please do not go around people at work and people in your home and look at them and say, you're a device that Satan is using. No, we don't have to go that far. You're a device no, but you have to understand is that you have to remember that how Satan works is Whomever will yield to allow him to use them, he's going to use them. And you have to be careful that sometimes there are barriers and walls set up for us not to get our breakthrough. And some people don't have their breakthrough, their healing, all because they choose not to communicate, because they choose not to talk about it. And guess what? At the end of the conversation, you cannot control what the other person did. You can't control what they think or say. And what I've learned, someone shared with me, not what I've learned, but what added to what I've learned, many times forgiving people, you're releasing them. It's not what they did was that you say, oh, it didn't bother me, but there's times you forgive them to release them so your prayers can be heard. Was I comfortable that they offended me? No. But the conversation needed to be had because why? The Lord tells me to forgive them. It's not easy, but I have to forgive them so we can move on. So the Lord can hear my prayer. So let's move on. Please let me slow down a little bit. You have to understand this. The preacher is not the only speaker. The preacher is not the only speaker. Listen to this. Lady Jones, if you can pass out that. And once we get finished with this diagram, we will end. They're going to be putting on the screen a simple diagram to help us with this. The preacher is not the only speaker. Real quick, we do this and we're going to end right here. We'll do this a little more next week to review. Please forgive me. Like I said, I do want to be brief. The preacher words are not the only thing the listener encounters during the sermon. There are multiple lines of communication that exist. Please check out the handout. If you look at the handout, you see with God, the Lord Jesus Christ, the Bible, the speaker, and the listener. The Lord speaks through the preacher, but he also speaks to the listener. The Lord speaks through the Bible, and the Bible speaks to the speaker and the listener. You have to understand, when it comes to hearing the message, the Lord used whatever method for you to hear. So a lot of times what we have to remember that the Lord uses whom he will. Understand this. The leaders along with the lay members in ministry must learn and know the ministry. So let me remind you this. Please, excuse me. Pastors hear from the Lord as they prepare the sermon and study his word. They also hear from the Lord while preaching it. One thing I've learned is this. The Lord does speak to me and others while we're ministering. But what's very important when a person is relaying the message, that they share what the Lord is saying from his word, not from a personal standpoint. See, this is what's very important to me every time I minister. Do not take this platform, this podium, the time, and deal with something personal for 30 people, and I just need to talk to that one. This time to minister is very important, and this time is for to be life-changing, heart-moving, and we should not take this time as pastors and leaders to mess over the people of the Lord. So we have to understand is that when it's time to minister, that's why we have to pray, study, and fast, because you don't come on Sundays and come on Wednesdays, but then you gather for foolishness and games. You really don't. If you wanted to play games, you would have stayed home with the dog. You wanted to play games, you would have went to a game. But that's the thing is when we come to worship, we come to Bible study, we come to activities and events, we don't come to play. So we have to understand that when you look at the diagram, the line of communication from the speaker to the listener is significant. But there are others. God also has direct access to the listener. Listeners hear from God as they prepare their hearts for worship, as they practice spiritual disciplines and action with others during the week. Let me be mindful of you. If it doesn't sit well with you, if it doesn't line up with the word, you should know that. The Bible said, my sheep know my voice, and the stranger they will not follow. And what's sad is that a lot of leaders take time here to manipulate for personal gain. And that's sad because there are so many pastors and leaders that are hirelings. They're just there for the money. They're just there to be seen. They're just there for the clout. But somebody's soul is at stake. Somebody's life, people coming to you for help, for guidance, for resolution in something personal. And then somebody takes advantage of that. Somebody mess over that. That's very hurtful. Because you have to understand, given this opportunity to minister and to speak is very important and it can't be taken lightly. A pastor has the blessed opportunity to watch out for the soul of the individual. So we have to understand that the Lord is speaking. So when it's time, we encourage that it's time for worship, get rid of the noise. Because when you do come together, if you come together for an hour, we try your best. I know it's not easy all the time. You got to put the bills to the side. You got to put some of the distractions to not put. You got to put it to the side. Excuse me. But you also have to try to focus because it's time for worship. And it's hard because you say, when I leave here, I got to deal with this. I got to deal with that. But while you're in the presence of the Lord, worshiping, that time the Lord can speak to you and give you your solution. But you have to clear the noise. You have to get rid of the distraction. Listen to this. The Lord speaks to the listeners as they pray, read, worship, and praise. Understand, when we take time out to serve the Lord, is an opportunity for Him to speak to us. Many times, many people don't take the time necessary and focus on, let me take this time for the Lord to speak to me. We're spending more time begging. Lord, I need you to do this. Lord, I need you to do that. But in those quiet times when you should not be begging, you should be thanking, the Lord can speak and give you a solution. But we have to listen. Our ears have to be sensitive to what the Lord is saying. Giving the worship experience. This was very important. I had to learn this the hard way. I had to learn to stop complaining about worship experience. Because what we have to remember, when it's time for worship, this is another opportunity for me to get my healing. This is another opportunity for me to get my deliverance. This is another opportunity for the Lord to do a miracle in my life. So I have to change my mindset when I go to worship. I got to change my mindset when I go to Bible study. Because this might be the time the Lord speaks to me. The Lord can heal you during Bible study. The Lord can deliver you during choir rehearsal. He can do it whenever, but we have to change our mindset. How do you change your mindset? By learning how to communicate. Because see, we say it all the time. I used to say, and I try my best not to say, I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. But after I get finished giving them a piece of my mind, if it doesn't change anything, what good did it do? So we have to understand that. Let me move on, and let me end with this. I'm going to say this part we have to review more. Giving the worship experience, you have to give yourself totally to the worship experience. It's very important when it comes to communicating with the Lord. How many times have the long week, but when you got into the presence of the Lord, that weight was lifted off of you? And even with the cares of this life, when you heard something, the smile from the usher, the smile from the greeter, that one song that the praise team ministered lifted the burden from you. They communicated through song. You have to understand, when you give yourself totally to the time and the situation. I'm going to say this, I don't know how many times. If you thought enough of it to give it your presence, think enough of it to give it your attention. That's what we say. It might be one thing that is said tonight that will deliver you for the rest of your life. But guess what happens? We heard it, but we wasn't listening. Or when we heard it and we did not apply it. That's what's wrong with many of us, including myself. We hear it, but we got to apply it to our lives. It works if you work it, but we have to apply it. I'm going to end there because I said I will not be long. We will review this. I promise you, next week I'll move a little slow. We will review this. But one thing we want to make, thank you. One thing we want to make is that we communicate through the noise. The distractions that we have in this life can't stop us from communicating and can't scare us from communicating. There's some conversations I don't want people to have with me. I'm being honest. But in this life, they're going to have to come. That's a part of this life. That's part of being mature. So we're going to continue with this more next week so we can finish up this and deal with something else. But we have to communicate through the noise. Also next week, we're going to talk about clearing the fog when we communicate. We're also going to talk about clearing the fog. We didn't get to that. I did not want to be long tonight because we still got at least another week or two in dealing with this. Amen. Can we give the Lord a hand praise? Thank you. We thank those who join us through Facebook Live and YouTube. Please forgive me. Pray for me that I slow down. I get so excited as I move. If you have not sown into the ministry, please do. You can find how to sow through our website at rndministries.org. There you can find so Cash App and through PayPal. Any gift that you give, we're greatly appreciated to the advancement of the kingdom of the Lord. Please be mindful. Please be mindful. On this Saturday, we are having Walking in Faith, where we're taking the time to talk and walk and exercise. Please keep your eyes and your ears to the forecast. If it is raining before we get started, we will not have it. And we only plan to be out for an hour, hour and a half, or until I get tired, whichever one comes first. But we plan on walking and exercising and just fellowshipping. Please also, another announcement, starting June 5th, that is the first Sunday in June, June 5th, our morning manifestation will begin at 9 a.m. We are moving back to service 30 minutes to begin at 9 a.m. So please tell somebody about Restoration Dominion Ministry, and thank you for joining us for this rehab session. You have a blessed night. Thank you. Can we give the Lord one more hand, please?